This time last year at Open Day, Bond launched its suite of brand new transformation degrees. How good does that sound? Featuring the bachelor programs of digital transformation, entrepreneurial transformation, health transformation, and legal transformation. Now, these degrees were designed to respond to the future of work, breaking down silos between disciplines and creating a new kind of graduate. In this session, we'll look inside a CoLab classroom and speak to some students. But first up, we have Professor Nick James, Executive Dean of the Faculty of Law and a key mind behind these new degrees. Welcome back. You're everywhere. That's awesome. You're very busy. Can you tell us a little bit about these transformation degrees? For me, I have no idea because I wasn't here when they were here.
No, fair enough. It's a good question, and there's a lot of interest in these new degrees, but we have to kind of explain them each time because they are quite radical and innovative. So we sort of started with the point that a lot of people are observing at the moment, that the world of work is being fundamentally transformed and disrupted. So, these new technologies, internationalization, changing demographics, changing cultures, everything is just shaking things up out there in the world of work. And you often hear people saying things like, the kind of jobs that young people today are going to be doing in 10 years' time don't even exist yet.
Yes.
Which of course makes it challenging for universities, particularly those like Bond, that are really focused on preparing students for their future careers. So it got us asking, what do we need to do to respond to this disruption? So we went out and we spoke to employers across a wide range of sectors, and they told us what we already suspected, was that they're already looking for people that have all new job titles and all new job descriptions, and they were struggling because they said, there's no degree that leads to this position. We need people trained up in these skills with this expertise, but there's no degree that prepares them. And so we went back to the drawing board and said, okay, let's start to build those degrees for what is a world of work that looks completely different. And we developed these 4 degrees.
And then what kind of students should do these degrees? Are they creative students or?
It's any student who's paying attention to what's happening out there in the world. Okay. I mean, of course, we still offer all the traditional degrees. And of course, there are still the traditional career pathways. So for me in law, of course, we still offer a law degree because there is still demand for lawyers. But at the same time, these professional sectors are being turned on their heads, and they need new types of graduates. And that's what these degrees are doing.
You hit the nail on the head, Professor. I couldn't agree more. You've got to really have eyes and ears on at all times at the moment. Things are just changing every day, every second, really. So we stopped by the Transformation CoLab classroom last week to get an insight into the kinds of discussions students are having in class. So let's take a look, and then we'll be back with 2 students, Harry and Shari.
Hi, I'm Thomas Coughlin, and I'm a teaching fellow in the Transformation CoLab.
Hi, my name's Wendy Benithan. I'm an associate professor in the Faculty of Law, and I co-convene one of the units in the Transformation CoLab program. What we're doing here today is looking at how scientists have modelled an ethical decision-making framework to try and establish a baseline for decision-making by autonomous vehicles. It's a real-world situation, and we're keen to see how CoLab students approach these problems and what solutions they might have.
Not only allow us to talk about what some of our ideas are surrounding these issues, but actually be placed within the situations and build a little more empathy and perspective on what actually the consequences of those decisions and values are.
So we're going to have a look at some of the scenarios that they put forward and get you guys to think about which is the better outcome, A or B.
All right, so what we can see here is a particular type of dilemma that we see pop up in ethical discourse traditionally, but now we're looking at it particular to autonomous vehicles. So in this example, the autonomous car has sudden brake failure and has the option to continue forward and kill a bunch of pets. So in this case, we have 2 dogs and a cat crossing the road. Or it can swerve to miss that collision, but in doing so, it will hit a male, a female doctor, and a pregnant lady. So what should the autonomous car do in these sorts of environments?
Obviously, you don't want to kill animals for no reason, but I think you have to value the human life more than the life of the pets. So I think the car should continue on straight. Okay, so this is kind of making an evaluative statement that if we're marketing self-driving cars, human life is to be protected over, say, pets or domestic animals in the urban environment. Yeah, I think so.
So does that change if instead of being a domestic cat or dog, you're instead talking about the last surviving member of an endangered species at all?
I don't think so. I think regardless of whether it's an endangered species or not, you need to value the human life more, unfortunately, obviously. But I think, yeah, the car should still continue on straight, even if it is an endangered species.
What we might do now is look at a little more complicated example where we start to compound these different factors into the same scenario. So what we've got here is we've got the self-driving car with sudden brake failure. Its options are to swerve, missing some pedestrians that are crossing illegally, but in doing so, it's going to hit a barrier. Hitting that barrier will result in the drivers of the car dying, and we've got a criminal, a large man, a male doctor, one baby, and a male executive in the car who are casualties. If instead it decides to continue in its forward path and take out the pedestrians, in this sense, we've got one criminal, a large man, a male doctor, and a baby as casualties. And note, they are crossing in a red signal. Does this factor into your evaluation at all, or is that kind of not a priority here?
I think it would factor into the evaluation. If the pedestrians are crossing on a red signal, then that's something they shouldn't be doing legally, so it could hold them liable. The other thing about the scenario is that by continuing straight in the second option, we actually have one less death. So if we're looking at it numerically, that's also causing less harm by having one less person killed.
Yeah, so I do agree with your point, Shari. They should definitely continue straight. Firstly, because it's less interference. I think as much as possible, we should try not to change the course of things. And secondly, I don't think that their crime that they're committing is enough justification for them to end up dead. I don't think that would really qualify in court that because they were jaywalking, then it's okay that they were run over. And also it is one less life. So those are my three main reasons why they should continue straight.
I think the issue is though that, for example, the baby would have no idea that it was crossing illegally. So, for example, if there was a group of kids that were to run across the road, unknowing that the light was red, then it kind of, they're not doing it intentionally. So, if you were to go straight, that's killing innocent lives regardless. And as the owner of the vehicle, you have willingly chosen to purchase a vehicle knowing that there may be issues like this. So, whereas the pedestrians have no clue.
So activities such as the moral machine give us a little bit of insight into some of the ethical dilemmas, but they're by no means going to give us the whole story. For starters, there's the question about, is this a valid way of working out what sort of ethical standards we expect from autonomous vehicles? Is putting it up to what is essentially a fairly biased popular vote really a good way of establishing a moral code for an autonomous intelligence system? Then, of course, there's a yawning disconnect between legal liability for in the event that you hit a pedestrian while driving a traditional vehicle. How does that translate to things like the moral machine? This gives us a guideline, but it's by no means the whole picture of how we should be programming these vehicles and how we should be regulating their use on the roads, including for liability when they do fail and cause harm to passengers and occupants.
Harry, Shari, welcome to Open Day live from Bond. That was such an interesting discussion. So let me ask, how do you approach a global challenge like this? What do you think? It's kind of crazy. Hey?
Yeah, it's really hard. Obviously, it's like a big issue, and a lot of ethical issues come into play with different things like that. But it's really interesting. We get to go through it with obviously our professional lecturers, and they help us through it. But it's really good to approach these things just in small doses, kind of see each problem on its own and work it from there.
I find it really interesting when you're coming up with these topics. Can you just remind us of some topics you've done in the past?
Yeah, we've done so many. So obviously a lot of ethical issues. We cover a lot of environmental issues, political issues, and then as well as just like legal issues and basic enterprise foundations and things like that.
It's super interesting. Shari, what would a typical day look like for you?
These kind of challenges and hard questions that you can't really answer are a typical day. We do so much problem solving and thinking and discussion work as well. Lots of what do you think and how are we going to fix it? Yeah.
Now, Harry, you actually have started a whole other degree, right? What happened there?
Yeah, so I actually began at Bond and studied psychology, and then I went to a different university and started an education degree as well, and then I found my way back to Bond now for the entrepreneurial transformation.
Wow, you sound like a true entrepreneur, changing, changing, innovating. That sounds really cool.
I definitely feel like I've found my degree that I'm enjoying and want to do now, though.